Hey everybody, it's Dale Jr. back in the Dirty Mo Media studio, and we are here a little extra this week because there's some breaking news. Obviously, a lot of us have been waiting around to see what NASCAR might do after the race at Richmond, the confrontational finish with Austin Dillon and Joey Logano and Denny Hamlin. And the word finally come down this Wednesday, this afternoon, that NASCAR has decided to take away the playoff eligibility that was given to Austin Dillon through the win. He gets to keep the win of the race, but it will not allow him to take advantage of that and move on into the playoffs. So it removes him and the owner from the playoff grid. They also decided to dock the team 25 points, drivers and owner points. After the win, it moved him up to 26th in points. Once he's removed from the playoffs, this will drop him back to 31st. So there's a section in the rule that deals with the playoff eligibility, and it states race finishes must be unencumbered by violations of the NASCAR rules or other actions detrimental to stock car racing or NASCAR as determined in the sole discretion of NASCAR. So, a lot of mumbo jumbo there, some stuff that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, but it sounds like the NASCAR can NASCAR always, I think a lot of leagues do this, and I've been familiar with this for some time. NASCAR is always going to have the final word and the final decision to have a little bit of leeway in unique scenarios like this where they can step in and try to right something that they think went wrong. And there will be a lot of things that happen in NASCAR races because of our sport being so unique that are unforeseen or unexpected. And obviously that would cover what happened this past weekend. NASCAR steps in. It's a tough deal for RCR. I don't know if you can take a lot of happiness in the fact that you get to keep the win. This will be a difficult thing for the team because, as I think Denny Hamlin noted in his podcast, it's almost a $2 million swing from where Austin is in the points currently to where he might have eventually finished had he had the chance to race it out in the playoffs. So a lot of money on the line here, or a lot of money that the RCR team would have benefited from having should they have made the playoffs. They still have a couple races to go to try to make that happen, but the way they ran this year, the odds are certainly stacked against them. Joey Logano was also fined for what we saw of his actions on pit road, $50,000. As far as I remember, that's pretty standard for that kind of action, although I thought his activity on pit road was a little hairier or crazier than what I've seen in the past. But I also know that pit road probably shouldn't have been that busy as far as individuals walking around and running around. So, if you feel like that's fair, some might think that's a little bit light. But NASCAR did the right thing, at least by getting Joey's attention for what he did. And also, finally, NASCAR has decided to suspend the spotter from the 3-car, apparently for saying wreck him, right? So I think that's a good move. Obviously, it's a little murky, as everything is in NASCAR, getting into conversations between, crew chiefs, spotters, and drivers. But that was, even if the driver even if the spotter does kind of turn into a fan in that moment over the excitement of the moment, there still is a job and a responsibility and some guidelines that they need to obey to or stay within. And NASCAR felt like that, given the orders to wreck other drivers is against a code of some sort. So I kind of agree with that. I think that, while I can understand the excitement in the moment, I think we all should hold each other to a certain standard. And crew chiefs, spotters, they all can't cry innocent in these moments. They are all a part of the team. It's not, it's everybody involved has a role and a responsibility to get that car to the finish line and get it there in a good way. So, I don't really, have a problem with this. I feel like that it was a wild finish, a lot of bad things going on there at the end, and it's, people have talked over and over and over this week about a line, an imaginary line, an invisible line, and it's really, it's this what's over the line, what's too aggressive. And it's not defined. It's not any more defined today. It's not any more defined after this ruling. I think drivers, all have a different interpretation of what a block is, what a clean move is, what a bad move is, what dirty driving is, how much dirty driving is too much dirty driving. Everybody has a different interpretation, just like the league itself in the booth. Each race director has a different interpretation of what he's seeing on the racetrack, and when he sees a driver do something incorrectly or against the rules, they all may view it and rule differently depending on the Truck Series, the Xfinity Series, and the Cup Series. So all of this is kind of a big, giant gray area, and NASCAR, in I think a lot of people's eyes, needed to come in and be the big brother, or kind of come in and settle things down and make a decision that would restore a bit of order and understanding that, we can't have this every single race. We can't you can't allow this to kind of go unchecked, if you will. So hopefully this tidies things up a little bit in terms of how the drivers conduct themselves on the racetrack going forward, and what's acceptable going forward. I still feel like that you can get down in the corner and give somebody the bumper and move them up the racetrack and win a race. I would not think that going forward that's still not okay, right? So I feel like that there is a point when it is too aggressive and maybe going over the line. And again, it's a blurry place and not defined, and NASCAR has the very difficult job that none of us do, and that's to decide when it's too much. And so they've made that decision today. So I think it's impactful moment for the sport. We criticize NASCAR often about decisions they make. I don't, and I know everybody was wondering about why this was taking so long. There are a lot of things that are involved in making a decision like this, and not only do you have to feel like you're making the right decision in the moment, but you also have to think about the collateral damage or the ill-intended, repercussions of this decision. You have to think as far down the road as you possibly can. You get as many people in the room, in the NASCAR executive offices, you get as many people in the room to try to determine, we make this decision. What are some of the negative things that could happen, or how could this open up a big can of worms for us going forward? So I think it's wise for them to take their time to make sure they get it right instead of trying to rush to the decision that they believe the public demands. And so I'm good with the time it took to get this to where they wanted to go, and it's a difficult day for RCR. This will we have to kind of think back and compare it a little bit to Spingate and Michael Waltrip Racing. This will not have a positive effect on RCR. It will be negative in many different ways. Not only the monetary deficit that this creates, that they were going to benefit from being in the playoffs that I mentioned earlier, but they have sponsors to answer to. They have to explain this to all of their teammates, not only in the building, the people working on their cars, the men and women at RCR, but all of the partners involved in trying to keep their organization moving forward. They're in a very difficult point in their own existence, trying to find some more, performance out of their cars, get to running. But we've all been very critical of RCR this year. It's been a very difficult year for them, and I think they're taking that more and more personally with a chip on their shoulder. So none of us want to see that affect that company in a very bad way, or cause them, irreparable harm. But I feel like, NASCAR felt like they had to step in here and make this decision, and I think the sport will move forward in a good direction.
You were talking about Elton Sawyer. He did say that specifically. That's why they took so long. It was the magnitude of the situation. But is this the right call? Do you think this was the right decision that NASCAR ultimately made?
Well, I think time will tell whether this is a good decision for NASCAR. I thought about this for the last several days. Of I look back to, again, I look back to kind of Spingate and all of the things that they tried to do to make that right. And while, yes, I believe Clint Boyer spun out on purpose, and I hate to drag this back up for Clint because he doesn't deserve it, but, all of the things that they tried to do on the front end were probably correct, but there were some other decisions on adding people to the playoffs and trying to make that right that I didn't believe in. And so it's still, you kind of worry whether they've gotten this right, For me, it's all about the integrity of the sport. Does this help the integrity of the sport? And going forward, not so much do the drivers, understand, or has this affected the drivers in any way? It's really like, public perception of our sport. Have we made a choice that that helps people feel confident about our leadership and about tuning in and feeling like they're going to see a legitimate show the next weekend? And I feel like that this does go in that direction. None of this, as sucky as it is for RCR, as rough as it's going to be for Austin and Richard to handle. I don't think none of this is detrimental or hurting the sport. I think these are decisions that NASCAR was forced to be put in position to make, and they made them.
You were talking about leadership, and earlier this week on the download about people fearing Mike Helton. Does this kind of give NASCAR the authority that you were looking for?
That'll come over time. We were joking Tuesday on the show about the inspector on pit road that was animated at Joey Logano as he was pulling up to stop his car. I love that energy. I've shared that with the folks at NASCAR, and I was afraid that that individual would maybe get even reprimanded for that, for his energy and how he handled that situation. But from what I was told, that didn't happen. I was encouraging that that's a good energy, that we need the drivers to certainly respect the officials, and especially when they're thinking about who's in that booth every race weekend. We're very critical of the booth. I don't love that. I don't want to be critical of the booth. But there are moments when we the general fan base and ourselves are hard on them. Not that never happened when Mike Helton was in the booth. I mean, I got called to the trailer because I was probably overcritical of Helton and what they were doing in the moment of the race. And so, but I do feel like that, I've always felt like when NASCAR was strong, harsh, when there's infractions, whether it's cars or drivers or things happening on the racetrack, the harder they can come down on teams and drivers and try to keep all of that group in line and keep them honest, the better. And so I feel like that, Elton Sawyer and his team are evolving and learning. He's still relatively young in this role, only been there for a couple years. And so I think he's understanding, how he might need to adjust, his disposition. And so I'm hoping that, they've learned a lot about themselves in this moment.
What about like the competitive spirit now of like racing for a win? And Elton Sawyer actually, he's doing a media availability right now. Our very own Jordan Bianchi, he asked, like, is there concern about taking away full contact racing? The type of racing that NASCAR prides itself on. Elton Sawyer said, "We encourage that. We want them to race hard. That's our DNA for 75 years."
Yeah,
Does this dilute the competitive spirit? You think?
No. Where was there any contact in that race up until that point?
Yeah,
none. I mean, I don't think they're rough enough. But I don't know how you get there. What happened on that last lap was way too much, but everything else for 490 some laps was way too little for me, for my taste, right? For my appetite. When we go to short track racing, and we saw this at Bristol earlier in the year when they had the tires that were wearing out and they couldn't drive as hard as they wanted to, and they had to take care of the tires. It allowed drivers to be able to get to their back bumper in the middle of the corner, and we saw guys pushing each other out of the way for the lead. 50 laps, 150 laps into the race, not even halfway, and they're using each other up a little bit, just enough. Like, hey, I want through. Get out of the way here for a second. If you're going to slow down, I want to go faster. That's what my appetite for short track racing is, and that race had none of it up until that final moment. So, I'm not, I think while that's not a terrible question, that's probably not what I would be asking Elton in this moment because, the drivers, I don't think they're hard enough on each other over the course of the journey. And, man, I would love it if they were a little rougher. But, that's just me. That's personal preference. And, again, not that I think that last lap was too much for my appetite. But, boy, it was lacking the majority of that event.
Does RCR appeal this?
Yeah. I guess they could. I don't even know if they can. And maybe they will, I think that knowing how I might not be surprised, I guess, if Richard's initial reaction is to appeal it because we heard how dismissive he was of all of the things everybody was trying to show him in the post-race media center, about the audio on the radio. And he, oh, cool, no, that couldn't happen. No, he truly believed, like, there's no way that was going on. When in truth it was. And so I could see them using the SMT data and trying to go and make a case against what happened on that last lap. I believe that this penalty, in my opinion, this penalty for Austin revolves around what the contact with Denny Hamlin, not the 22. I could be wrong, but I believe that if Austin knocks the 22 out of the way and that's the end result, none of this ever happens. I think the penalty is from the contact with the 11, and I do believe that their story, Austin Dillon's story, and everyone at RCR is that wasn't an intentional move. The 22, yeah, they'll admit that. He went down there to hit him and do everything he could to get by him at all costs. But they believe, and I truly believe that they believe this to be true, that they did not wreck Denny on purpose. And so if they can appeal, I wouldn't be surprised with everything at stake, right? An opportunity to be in the playoffs, although we know that, they're not a championship threat, but it's at the minimum a couple $1 million for them to be in that playoff field. If they have an opportunity to appeal, I would not be surprised at all if it's filed. I guess if we, closing thoughts, there'll be a ton more conversation. This basically just kind of churns up everything at the bottom of the lake. We've been talking about this incident for 3 days, and now we'll talk about everybody's reaction to the penalties all the way up until and through Michigan. The media is going to go to Michigan and ping every driver they can and ask them the same questions you've asked me. Is this the right decision? I think the majority of people are going to say that this was something, that NASCAR's hand was forced here. NASCAR was put in a tough situation to make this choice, and they had to make it. And so it'll be interesting, I think, to read the individual drivers' comments. While I trust my own opinion and thoughts, I really love to hear from the people that are in the garage every single day, and the drivers driving these cars, the ones that are responsible for controlling their cars in these big moments. And so it'll be an interesting weekend as we roll through Michigan to hear everybody's take on this. A lot of the drivers would probably likely prefer to avoid the media while all this is going on, but some of them will have mandatory availabilities and be asked the questions that we want to hear the answers to. So should be a fun couple of days in NASCAR and in the NASCAR media landscape and all the way through the weekend. So be interesting too to hear what I think Kyle Busch and Austin Dillon have to say while Kyle's trying to, Kyle's a part of this, part of the team. He's trying to find his way into the playoff field, and Austin may have just missed his one opportunity to get there. And how will RCR respond? Right, that's they've gotten kicked down today, and how will they get back up, and what will be their temperament and response to all of this?